All right. Thank you, Jordan. And we are going to invite our keynote panelists now to come on up. I'll actually be introducing them with questions directed to each of them. So if y'all want to come on up and grab a seat, grab a microphone, you can turn it on, make sure it works. Very good. This is the session on culture building and institutions. So as Jordan said, if that's a topic that interests you and maybe you're presenting on that, you can share your research and submit that to Movement and Being and help shape the community down the road. All right. Our session on culture building and institutions, we have three excellent guests, three people that I respect as leaders who connect in sports in different ways. So we'll get a variety of perspectives. I'm going to ask each one of them to share a little bit about themselves, and I'll give you a brief bio as we go on down the line. So let's start with Josh. Josh Lindblom is a former Major League Baseball player. He has a variety of roles now, so I'm going to see if I can get all these right. Brewers, some connection with the Milwaukee Brewers a little bit. The Pro Athletes Outreach Sports Ministry. Congruency, you're the builder of Congruency. And volleyball dad. You wanted to make sure I mentioned that you are a youth sports dad. So that's Josh Lindblom. Josh, can you tell us a little bit about how the combination of faith and sports has shaped the leadership roles you have today?
Yeah, I think last night, thinking through kind of like what Graham discussed, like Graham took me to the eye doctor a little bit. And so when I sit here, everything that Paul just described about me are the lenses through which I see sport and the world through. And sport has shaped me profoundly from the time that I was 5 years old, throwing a sock into the couch, getting the third out of the World Series, to when I was 35 years old, walking off the mound for the last time at Wrigley Field. And then now on the sidelines with my kids, and just seeing the integration of how God is intimately involved and concerned with every single part of our lives. When I look at the story of Scripture, there's a good God that's created a very good world that's gone very bad. And this good God has not left this world by itself, but He sent His Son to restore and redeem, and I'll steal Graham's saying, restore and redeem every corner of the garden, and that includes the human institutions that we have. Which includes sport. And so, I can't look at sport and see any way in which it hasn't shaped me profoundly.
Thanks, Josh. Moving on down the line, Juliana Smith. I'm going to see if I can get this title right. I butchered it last night, didn't quite get it, but I'm going to get it this time. Executive Senior Associate AD for Mission, Impact, and Enrichment at Baylor Athletics.
Correct.
All right. Also, women's basketball general manager, a college All-American and SEC champion, and a foodie. So if you have questions about Waco food and you want to know a place to eat, she's your person. Same question for you. Can you tell us how sports and faith has shaped your leadership roles?
Absolutely. Interestingly, as I was reflecting on this question, I thought about how I got into sports. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention I was also a Girl Scout. So shout out to all the Girl Scouts in the room. But I actually, I'm the youngest of 5 children, but because of the age gap, I was essentially raised as an only child. And so sports was a way for me to interact with children my age. So basketball, cheerleading, yes, it's the sport, track and field. And I didn't realize how my interaction and my engagement in sport early on really helped me to channel my leadership skills that already existed. And as I think about my professional career, starting out pursuing a career in intelligence, actually, and the shift that I felt in my heart that I was supposed to be doing sport as a profession, which I didn't really know existed. And every move since I made that decision to switch to a career in sports, the Lord has guided my every move. And I haven't, each move that I've taken, I would not have anticipated taking, right? Going to Oklahoma, I didn't know anyone in Oklahoma. I had never really left the East Coast. And then even the experience that I had there and moving on to Texas Tech, working in ops. That like I would have never thought that I'd be an operations director. Going back to Oklahoma after I said I actually wasn't ever going to go back to Oklahoma, and the experience that I had leading the people operations of that athletics department in such a way that allowed me to understand the responsibility that I held in engaging and stewarding someone's best moment of their career, getting a dream job, and probably some of the most hurtful moments of their career, losing that dream job, and every moment in between. And then the move to leave Oklahoma to go to an institution like Colgate University, leaving the Power Four. What a lot of folks believe that if you leave the Power Four, you can't ever get back to the Power Four, because evidently that's the place people want to be. But just trusting the Lord in that process, and trusting the Lord, giving him, I guess, my open hand to guide me and lead me in how I stewarded the responsibilities that I was gifted on paper prematurely, but knowing and trusting that I was equipped as long as I continued to stay aligned with what the Lord was calling me to do, telling me to do, leading me to do. So, yeah.
Thank you. Okay, Justin Giboney, an attorney, a political strategist in Atlanta, Georgia. He leads the AND campaign as its president and executive director, also an author. There's a book out there from him that you can check out, and a new book coming out later this fall. A former college football player at Vanderbilt, and also doing a little coaching now on the youth sports side. So a lot of roles for you. Justin, how has faith in sports shaped your leadership?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I wish I could say that I always got it right, and that, through college and all that time, my faith, I was right where I needed to be. That's just not the case. I wasn't always the leader I needed to be. But what I do find is, even through those mistakes and not being what I need to be, when I finally got together, I began to piece together the things that I had learned through some of those experiences. So for me, it started off where sports in college was very much an idol, right? I didn't have the Graham perspective or the Graham lens that I should have had. And so I actually ended up going into politics because I was still searching for something to replace sports that was competitive, that I could get a certain feeling from. And so it took me a little longer to get there. But when I finally put my faith in front and let that lead me, I think it was really helpful. One of the big things that kind of shaped my leadership in regard to faith in sports is, I think sports, obviously our faith tells us how we should treat our neighbors, how we should engage with people, even the ones that we don't like, with compassion and that they still have worth and all those things. And I think I was able to put that into practice and learn a lot from that in sports. Being able to work with people who I disagreed with for a common goal. Because I think today we don't really I think we're taught almost not to do that by a lot of influencers, and especially partisans. We all have our kind of pet issue, and those issues are important to us because a lot of times we're invested in it. It has something to do with our identity. And once somebody disagrees with us on that particular issue, we're kind of taught like, there's nothing we can do together. You have no worth to me. I push you aside. We're actually taught almost that there's nothing that I can learn from you. But I think all of us would say, as we went through sports, there were teammates who we had some serious disagreements with. But I don't ever recall going into a game or being even in a dangerous situation where I didn't think I could depend on them. We had our differences, but we were also able to come together for an objective and have a sort of interdependence. And I think even as we go into society, as we go into the public square, understanding that we don't have to agree on everything, not even the tough things, because those are the things that matter, to have a certain level of interdependence, to work together, and to have a common respect for one another. And I think we, number one, should get that from our faith. It's all through the Bible, but also often apply it in sports.
Excellent. Okay, so you have a little sense of these three and their roles and their journeys to get here. The next question, we want to think a little bit about institutions. And Graham set this up perfectly last night, unintentionally. We didn't coordinate on it. But he really gave us insight into the way cultures and institutions in sports can shape the experience. And he gave us some sociological lenses to think about that. With this panel, as we're thinking about leadership, we're trying to make sense of the way institutions and the cultures that we're a part of shape the leadership experience, create some possibilities, and also create challenges. So the first question that I want to ask and hear from all of you, when you think about institutional leadership and the institutions of sports and how they shape people, how have you seen cultures and institutions do it well? Like, what are the marks of a healthy and flourishing sports culture or sports institution?
I got it. So I think there's three big questions I think that every institution or culture, like when you're creating culture, that you have to answer. So the first one is, what story are we living? Every institution, every team, every organization, every person is living a story. And when I say story, what I mean by that is it's the way in which we find our value and our worth. And so the world is going to tell us one of three primary ways that we find our value and worth in that story, which is, I am what I do or produce, I am what I have, or I am what others say about me. And all of us, this is like the operating system in the back of our minds, whether we know it or not. And so you need to answer the question, what story are we living? And that begins to shape the culture that we have. The second question would be, what identity is getting elevated? And there's a lot of talk around identity at this conference. It's like if you're on Instagram or social media, it's like everybody's talking about identity. Identity is like a diamond, in my opinion. It's multifaceted, and I like to think about it as roles more so. All of us have different identities that we carry, station and vocation, like Graham talked about last night. And so I'm a father, I'm a former professional baseball player, I'm a husband, I'm a coach, and I carry this identity into whatever environment that I'm in. And so we need to ask which one of those is getting elevated. And then the third question is, whose voices are the loudest? And so voices determine, like the voices we listen to can either elevate or de-elevate different identities in our lives. And what I see in like cultures and leadership is when the wrong identity gets elevated in the wrong story and you're listening to the wrong voice, that's when dysfunction happens. And so in leadership, man, it is really, really important to be able to sift through all of those questions and take an honest reflection and look at like, what story am I living? What story am I reinforcing? What identity is getting elevated? And then whose voices am I allowing in my life to reinforce the stories and the identities that I hold and carry?
That's really good. What would you add to that, Justin?
Yeah, I think I would say that I like what he said, because every institution, every culture does have to have standards. It does have to have a vision and all those things. But I think we have to be careful, because sometimes that standard and that vision and that culture is just majority culture. And if you don't fit into it, then it's like, but is majority culture really the necessary culture that we need to have a successful institution or a healthy culture? And so I think what we have to do is really some self-examination to say, okay, what is our culture? Is it just the culture that I'm comfortable with because I have a certain amount of power and a certain amount of influence that I'm pushing on others that's not all that necessary for the objective that we came together for? So I think we do have to be careful about that. The other thing I would say about institutions is that our culture has become very much consumers of institutions. So, and you even see it in churches. So we don't necessarily want to serve institutions or build institutions. We want to see how institutions can serve us. So sometimes it's the coach hopping from team to team. It's the student hopping from team to team. It's the parishioner going from church to church. Instead of saying, okay, there may be a problem or there's something here, well, if it's not serving me now, then I just leave. Whereas, and I think Yuval Levin does a really good job talking about the importance of institutions. Institutions are supposed to shape us, but we don't get shaped properly and we don't get those principles if we're always just consuming institutions. And I even see it in Little League. You don't win a game or everybody wants to be on one particular team, instead of seeing the value of saying, even in this loss, us staying together, we probably get more out of it than if we would have won that particular game. And so I think we really, all of us need to look at how we become servants of institutions, builders of institutions, and not just consumers.
Another question on institutions, and Juliana, I think I'd love to hear your perspective on this. This was brought up during Graham's talk as well. Some institutions identify with a particular faith, right? There are Christian institutions. Baylor is one. We're gathered here at a Christian institution. In sports, there are a lot of secular institutions. They're not tied to a faith tradition. And so if you have a career in sports, there's a good chance you're going to work in sometimes a secular, sometimes a Christian organization. Juliana, you've worked in both spaces. As you think about your time in both spaces, what are the challenges, the possibilities of those tensions?
Whew. I would say one of the opportunities of doing sport at a Christian institution is that you would expect there to be, at least at the core, a mission fit for everyone who is at that institution, right? How we see the work that we do as if it's unto the Lord, and the way in which we function in those spaces and lead our students and collaborate and work alongside our peers should be aligned in a lot of ways. And so I believe that that's an opportunity to represent the kingdom in a way that, through sport, in a way that can't oftentimes happen comprehensively at a secular institution, right? Obviously, there are Christians who play sports and coach and lead at secular institutions, but to do so in community, in a space that is unapologetically sure about their identity, being centered around Christ, is a really unique opportunity. I think one of the challenges in leading in a space like that is oftentimes we go in with an assumption about alignment. And without doing the work to talk through explicitly expectations, core values, interpretations of our faith and how that is carried out in the work that we do, we can miss. As it relates to a secular institution and leading as a Christian in that space, I would hope folks would be curious about who we are and how we do what we do because of our Christianity, right? Because of how we lead and how they see us treat people, respond to conflict, celebrate victory, that they would be curious about humility, that they would be curious about grace, that they would be curious about what it means to not be too high or too low because of a result. And I would say I felt the most responsibility working at secular institutions because I assumed that no one knew Jesus, right? I showed up in spaces holding that responsibility to represent the kingdom in such a way that I could be a witness. And so I have to check myself often in a space like Baylor. That is still my responsibility. Even in the space where there is an overwhelming majority of the folks that I work alongside and that I am charged with leading who identify as Christian. So
that's really helpful.
Can I add to that real quick?
Please do. Yeah.
Working in like professional sports, that space, secular environment, obviously, I think the one thing I notice in that Christian secular divide is sometimes in Christian settings, we drop our theological anthropology like at the door, and we just assume that Christian spaces are going to be inherently better. And having a strong foundation that like we're all broken and disintegrated and sinful, and sometimes I don't think we extend that same grace in Christian spaces, and so having a very, very strong like theological anthropology is so important in that.
It's really good. Would you add anything to that at all, Justin, thinking about Christian secular institutions?
No, I think they handled it well.
All right, well done. Y'all covered it. We're going to get to another question here, and then I want space for you all to ask questions. So you should see a QR code up on the TV screen. Please feel free to scan that. And if there's something that you want clarity on or a follow-up on or a question we haven't covered, this is your chance to ask these three. Thinking about the future, so sports culture in the next generation, what are the pressing issues that Christians should be caring about, that they should be aware of? basically where should they be involved as we think about what's next?
Yeah, I think there's so many places to be involved, and it's really dynamic. One thing that I've noticed, especially on like so I'm a Little League football coach too, so I'll bring that perspective as well. But one thing I noticed is that more and more the football team, the sports team, has become the community, right? So we're more transient. Our neighborhoods aren't like they used to be exactly, where that was our primary community. So I just noticed that when there's a birthday party, it's the team, right? And that's where people come and they get their community from. And so whether that's good or bad, that's the reality we're in. And so as a coach, I try to think, okay, how do I implement these principles that they need to learn that they might have otherwise got from their neighbor down the street when it was more of a village that they need to somehow try to get from me now. And I think the beauty of sports, and it was great. I love the way that you guys talked about the marriage of the academic and the practitioner. Because one of the great things about sports is that there are some principles and things that it's hard to teach just in a classroom, that it's hard to teach just in theory. But as they go out there and play, you can really apply them, whether it's the diligence, whether it's the connection, the preparation, the connection between working hard and actually seeing a certain outcome, even getting up and moving forward. And as you said, taking a loss and learning something from it. It's hard to just say that without it actually happening to them. And sports allow us to do that. The other thing that I think we need to be very careful of is Christians, I think, should make it a point to let people know that sports can be a very important tool and a very important servant, but is a terrible master, right? And in so many ways, we have to show people it's a terrible. I mean, there's a lot of parents who are in it because I want my kid to go play in college. I want my kid to play in professional sports. But I have found, because I know people who've done all those things, I have found that sports sometimes can be like Gomer. Right? It's just an unfaithful partner. At some point, whether it's an injury, whether it's a bad coach or whatever, somebody else is going to wear your jersey. The crowd at some point is going to stop cheering for you. And I think we've all seen people who have fallen apart in that moment because they weren't prepared for that moment. And if Christians can prepare people for that moment and let them know that regardless of if the crowd is cheering for you or not, who has your jersey on now, you have always had value and you maintain that value. I think it goes a long way, but the earlier we can start with that message, the better.
Excellent. Let's get each of you on that as well.
Yeah, I would, as I've been reflecting on this question, I keep coming back to the person or the people, right? And I believe that we need to continue to focus on, when I think about student athletes, when I think about even our coaches and how we're leading them, there are so many issues that could cloud our ability to like see the person behind the issue, see the person behind what it is that they're dealing with or having to manage, how they're acting out. And I think it is our responsibility and an opportunity to really speak to the heart of someone and to not, and it gets increasingly harder, particularly at this level of Division I, when you think about paying student athletes salaries that are higher than the coaches who are coaching them, and that's a reality. And some people have different perspectives on whether that's good or bad, and I think it doesn't matter. I think our responsibility is the same. We're leading young people. We're helping coaches lead young people. And so what does the Lord and what does the Holy Spirit tell us to do with that responsibility? How are we showing up every single day in such a consistent way? How are we reminding them about their identity beyond the paycheck, beyond the playing time, beyond the perspectives of their parents and the expectations of their parents? I think as practitioners in this space, at least from my seat, we can easily get distracted, and it's an attempt by the enemy to tell us that sport isn't good, to tell us that the thing that we do and achieve in sport is possibly not good, and I reject that.
Everything is connected. And so I think in the future, you think about everyone that's represented here, high school or youth, high school, college, professional, the Lord has set up this like virtuous cycle where all of the work that everybody is doing in this room matters. Those that are ministering to youth athletes and their parents could be developing the next great high school athlete. Those that are in high school sports could be developing the next student athlete. Those that are developing the next student athletes could be developing the next professional. Those that are ministering to professionals could be developing the next great youth sport coach. I always tell myself, I say I'm the John Wooden of youth sports coaching, so if you want to talk about that later, we can. And so what I see is leadership development. What I would say is like one of the number one things moving into the future. I've had a few conversations already here, and I look at Mark 3 for me is like a guiding passage in this. Jesus appointed the 12 to be with him. I understand that everybody in this room wants to do something great for God. They want to discover God's calling on their life. What does the Lord want them to do? What the Lord first and foremost has called everybody to do is to be with him. And it's out of that relationship with him that he sends them out to preach. Notice who the subject of the verb is, Jesus. Then he gives them authority. Jesus is the one that gives the authority. So your leadership and the development and what you're doing always emanates from a place of your relationship and your time with Jesus. And I think that, for me, developing leaders who are in pursuit of the King is so important.
This is good stuff. We have 17 questions that have come in so far, so I don't think we're going to get to all of them, just warning. But we have about here 12 to 15 minutes to get through a number of these, and these are excellent. I will share these questions with our panelists afterwards and would encourage you to, if you see them, stop them in the hallway, and feel free to ask them yourself if we don't get to it. This first question that caught my eye, I think this is excellent. When looking for a reason to stay connected to a culture that isn't perfect and contribute to its success, what are the paths you've seen that lead to change, and what are the red flags to move on? So thinking about imperfect institutions, how do you find that balance between, yes, I can stay, I can contribute, versus, okay, maybe there's something else?
Wow, there's a lot of different reasons. I think first we have to remember that we're the salt and the light. And what is the value of salt and light if it doesn't go into infected places and dark places? So just because something isn't right doesn't mean a Christian shouldn't try to have influence on it. That's the first thing. As far as when do you know that it's time to leave? I think sometimes that's personal. What impact is it having on your spirit? Because there are times when you have to go and institutions aren't where you need to be. Is it negatively impacting your spirit? Are you in some way enabling things that you shouldn't be enabling? I mean, there's a variety of reasons given the circumstance, but I think those are two things to look out for.
Yeah, I'd start by saying every organization is imperfect because we are all imperfect people, full stop. I also believe that we're each uniquely gifted to do the work that the Lord has called us to do. And so I would first suggest taking a look at what your unique gifts are and where the gaps are in that organization and how there might be a unique opportunity for you specifically to fill that gap. And I think I would also agree with Justin, like you have to know within yourself and be guided by the Holy Spirit to know when the end has come. But it doesn't mean that because something is hard that it's not what God ordained for you to do. And it doesn't mean that because it's lonely or imperfect that it's not something that God is using to equip you for in that season or another season, or working through you for that particular organization in that season.
Yeah, there are no imperfect institutions. And I think I'm going to lean a little bit on my Catholic brothers and sisters in the room for this one. I believe it was St. Ignatius that the vow of stability. And so there's something to say about being in a place for a long time. And then the second part of that question of how do you know when to move on, I think consolation and desolation. So where does my heart come alive? And then where is my spirit troubled? And so working through that with the Lord in prayer, in silence, in solitude, and just seeking his answers through that, I think are probably the ways that I would answer that.
Okay, here's a question, speaking of desolation. How would you rate the state of youth sports? Travel, baseball, AAU basketball, youth football, as it relates to the ethics of competition and the ethics of the industry?
My team's great.
You're the John Wood. As the John Wooden of coaching, give us some insight on how you do that well.
I am not a youth coach, but what I would say in working in the college space over the last decade is I think it's a lost art that our young student athletes aren't participating in different sports. I think that's so important to think about what you learn by being really good in one sport and like actually really terrible at something else, or specializing maybe in an individual sport like tennis or track and field to an extent, and then having to play a team sport. I think there are unique opportunities and skills that you develop with the diversity of your experience, but while still moving your body and experiencing victories and defeats that we are seeing its impact at the college level with over specialization. So if there's one thing I'd recommend is put your kids in a lot of different sports.
Yeah, no, that's good. A few things I've seen is it's not all bad, but being in youth sports has gotten to a place where you do see some serious toxicity. And one thing because even, it's trickled down to Little League to where I was telling you yesterday, I know kids who have in the preseason been on 4 different teams, right? And so I just don't see a lot of honor and loyalty being taught.
Just to clarify, that's a 6-year-old you're telling me.
These are 6, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
6-year-olds.
Just want to say that.
Yeah, I mean, it's sad. So I just don't see that, hey, this is why you're honor. Win, lose, or draw, you have to have honor. You have to be loyal. I just don't see a lot of that being taught in the way that it should be. There's so much going on. It's tough. The other thing that worries me, and we talked about this a little bit yesterday too, is poor kids, because there's so much specialty, because the industry has got so expensive, poor kids who may need some development aren't getting the chance that they used to when they could just go to the rec center, they could go to other places. Because now nobody really plays rec ball, right? Like that's looked down upon. So unless they're really, really big or just stand out, in some other way, they're not getting a chance. I think that creates an opportunity for the church to make sure they're getting opportunities, because those are not kids we want to leave behind. But in this industry, they're getting left behind, and I don't know that there's a lot of people talking about it.
The first thing I would say is that performance matters. Excellence matters. And so sometimes I think we downplay that in Christian circles where we're just happy to be here. If I didn't perform at the professional level, I didn't have a job. And so performance matters. And then I think it's reframing competition as well. Competition has become, how do I prove that I'm better than you in an environment, rather than a mutual striving together to become who God has created us to be. And so like Graham said last night, sport is a school of discipleship. And so the kids that I coach, I'm always trying to create an environment of encouragement to become who God has created them to be. Because I think ultimately, that's what we want with sport, is for it to be a place and a context where we can become who God's made us to be. And it's like Justin said earlier, is that there's something special about sport when even in spite of our differences, we can come together to pursue a common goal. And there aren't many places like that in the world at all.
That's really good. This next question ties into the youth sports topic in some ways, but it extends beyond that. What do you see the relationship to be between sports institutions and the local church? Justin, you sort of hinted at this a little bit, and any of you can hop in here, but thinking about the relationship between sports, whether they're youth sports or higher level organizations in the local church?
I mean, the local church, I think one is a matter of community, right? How do we enter into what has become the community and kind of implement some of those values and principles that we want people to see? But then also in the practical way, how do we just get more people to volunteer, right? Can churches support rec leagues or other leagues in a way that get kids who aren't getting an opportunity the chance to actually get involved? Or can we just support them in, even if they do want to play, on travel teams or whatever, how can we grab some of those kids and help them through that? Because it'd be a huge loss. I mean, there's so many stories of guys who went, and ladies who played professional or in college who that got them through some of the tough periods of poverty, that they knew they had a coach, a sport they could play, they had people they could depend on. If we lose that, I think that's major. I really think the church can step into that.
Would you add anything to that, either of you?
Could I incite a riot, maybe? No.
We have space to do that. Yeah, go for it.
So I really think that the church as a whole is fighting the wrong fight. And I think that we need to reimagine how sport can be used as a vehicle for community, like Justin said. I posed this question to a pastor at our church a couple weeks ago. I said, "Hey, I'm thinking about starting a short-term mission trip, 2 to 3 months. That's what I want to do. These people are in more need of the gospel than just as much as anybody else in the world. They are losing, their time is being pulled from them. They're being pulled in separate directions, but man, these people need the gospel. There's kids, there's parents that are lost." I was like, can we get a group together to go on a short-term mission trip and reach these people with intentionality and evangelism and discipleship? And he was like, yeah, where are we going to go? And I said, we're going to go to the baseball fields and the basketball courts. And he was like, no, I don't think so. When you reframe sport as a mission field, and the church can get behind a group of people that are, and it's not perfect by any means, but a group of people that are intentional and trained, and they know how to impact sport and people. Man, these places that I go to on the weekends, there are people that are so lost and so in need of Jesus. And I think we're fighting the wrong fight, where it's, you need to be in a church on a Sunday. Like, from a church planner standpoint, if I'm a church and I'm going to plan why would I want to go plan another church that meets on 9 a.m. at Sunday? There's plenty of those out there. But if I can provide an opportunity for other people to maybe be involved in a community, a local body, which I think is very, very important, body of believers, why would we not rethink and start fighting a different fight that we can actually win? That's kind of where my thought is.
Okay. If you have arguments with Josh, please find him
Find
and
me in the
yell
hall.
at him. Yes. There will be I want to shout out Benjamin Quinn, who will be having a session. So if you look at those presentation sessions, he'll be thinking about these theological implications of the local church and travel sports. So I think really important topic to explore. Okay, we've got just time for maybe 2 more quick questions here. What is one thing that sports institutions are getting wrong, or, so you can pick either wrong or right, or one thing you see them getting right? So is there something that really stands out to you with the culture and institutions of sports where you would say they're getting that right? Or is there one thing you think, oh, we're off there, we're getting it wrong?
I'll go with the right. I mean, I think the work that everybody's doing in this room is right on track with what God wants. And it's sometimes it's hard to see that because you might not see the impact, but like FCA's work in club and team sports, play in their teams. I mean, the fact that they grab coaches after the game and want to pray with them, like there's little hints and little seeds that are planted that are showing people a different way to integrate faith and sport and their walk with Jesus. And so I would just lean on everyone in this room is doing something right.
Yeah, I would say I've been brokenhearted just about how polarized our society has been, especially since COVID. And I think we all know people who have been one side or the other, just brought to the extremes of all that stuff. And even in the midst of that, we still have people coming together in sports, right? Sports still, in a way, brings us together. And it's not insignificant because we have a lot of, again, on both sides, we have a lot of influencers who do everything they can to pull us apart. And even some of them are using sports right now, right? Everything's got to be this side or that side. Every player, anything that they do, well, you're with us or you're with them. You can't like anything that they do. And I would just tell us to continue those institutions that are saying, no, this brings us together. We're going to use this to bring us together and not let those voices who want to use sports to be divisive kind of win the day.
This is probably more philosophical in nature, but I would say I appreciate that sport requires or brings us together around the pursuit of excellence. Like, we serve a God who is excellent and honors excellence and wants us to do good. He created the world and it was good. He created us, we were good. And to think about sport as an exercise of pursuit of excellence and how that can translate to all areas of our lives and our service to the kingdom, I think is good.
Okay, final question here. And this is a question for you to give a quick shout out. So they're asking, who is a Christian leader that has shaped how you approach your own style of leadership?
I'll start. The first, there's two that I'm going to mention, and one's in this room. But the first one was my college coach. I went to Ole Miss, did track and field there, and my coach was unapologetically Christian. Side note, really funny story. We're driving to a meet at Mississippi State, so we're in a van, the throwers, and it's early in the morning, 5 a.m., and she has her Bible on the steering wheel. And I wake up in the pastor, I'm like, you want me to read that for you? And I did, and that was our relationship with Coach Wibbles. We had Bible studies in the hotel every away track meet, and how she led that team. She never forced it on you. It was just how she functioned as a coach and how she led her people. So that was something that was admirable to me. I do not drive with the Bible on the steering wheel, but it's just a funny example. And then the other one is Dr. Nikki Moore. She, I kind of happened upon her as a supervisor, and when I first got to Oklahoma, and obviously a secular institution and not one where folks outwardly profess their faith, but how she showed up in spaces, how she responded to frankly, injustice, how she responded to conflict was something that I learned to appreciate and hone in my own unique way, and how I show up in the workplace as an administrator, as a teammate in meetings, and as someone who supervises other people who I want to be allowed to be their fullest selves.
I would say my friend Chris Bouchard, the sports analyst, he has made some statements on behalf of the kingdom that were unpopular. He did so with compassion, but he also stood on his convictions. And I think in seeing him do that in a very public way with a lot of things online when everybody else was running from certain subjects really inspired the AND campaign and myself. I remember the day very clearly to say, no, somebody has to stand up, hold the line, and say what needs to be said. And that has always been a great example for me.
I'd say the two people for me, one, just reading his works, is J. Robert Clinton. He provided me a framework for understanding leadership development, spiritual development, and just how people are developed over the course of their lives. And then his protege, Dr. Terry Walling. And Terry gave me a way to integrate Dr. Clinton's teachings into my life. And so I'd say those two would be for me.
We have plenty more questions. We are out of time, unfortunately. Can we give it up for these panelists? Thanks so much. Good. Good.